August 19, 1945. Wehrmacht, Headquarters, East Prussia, General. Oberst Alfred Jodl studied the latest intelligence, reports from the crumbling Western Front. His staff had run the numbers on Allied supply lines, stretching more than 400 miles from the Normandy beaches to Patton's spearheading. Third Army. The Americans had outpaced their logistics. Patton's advance would stall within days, perhaps hours. No army could sustain such rapid movement without fuel. From his vantage point at Hitler's Wolfschanze headquarters, Jodl reflected on a hard-earned lesson every German commander knew. An armored division consumed roughly 150,000 gallons of fuel per day while on the move. With the Americans now 400 miles from their supply depots, the calculation was unavoidable. Patton's Third Army was headed for a halt, giving the Wehrmacht precious time to regroup along the Seine, perhaps even hold until winter. Yet, Jodl had no way of knowing that 125 miles to the south, nearly 6,000 trucks were already rolling eastward in an endless convoy, their headlights cutting through the night in defiance of conventional military wisdom. These vehicles were delivering 12,500 tons of supplies every single day. The Red Ball Express. A logistics operation so audacious that it defied all German assumptions about mechanized warfare was about to rewrite the rules. Within 72 hours, Patton's supposedly immobilized tanks would smash through German positions along the Seine. Within a week, they would liberate Paris. Within a month, they would stand at the German frontier. The Wehrmacht's most brilliant minds were about to learn a brutal lesson in American logistics, orchestrated by 23,000 truck drivers, 75% of them African, American, who turned a simple highway system into the most efficient military supply line in history. German. Confidence in the inevitability of American logistical failure was grounded in decades of experience and observation. The Wehrmacht had pioneered Blitzkrieg, revolutionized combined arms warfare, and intimately understood the tyranny of supply lines. Their campaigns had faltered repeatedly when logistics could not keep pace with tactical success. In Russia, German advances were halted not by Soviet resistance at first, but by the sheer inability to feed, fuel, and support troops over vast distances. German trucks broke down on poor roads. Horse-drawn wagons, still constituting 80% of military transport, couldn't match the speed of panzer spearheads. Railway gauge differences meant supplies often piled up hundreds of miles from the front. General de Panzertruppe Hinrich von Ludwitz, who would command the 47th Panzer Corps from September 1944, had written in July, "The Americans face the same logistical impossibility we confronted in Russia. Their mechanical advantage is also their weakness. Machines demand fuel, ammunition, spare parts. They have advanced 400 miles in 30 days. History teaches us what comes next. Paralysis. German intelligence had carefully tracked American consumption. A single Sherman tank burned half a gallon per mile on roads, far worse off-road. An infantry division required 700 tons of daily supplies. An armored division needed 1,000 tons. Patton commanded 12 divisions advancing along a 60-mile front. The numbers seemed indisputable. 12,000 tons per day, moved over 400 miles of bettered roads. Through a transportation network the Germans had systematically destroyed during their retreat. General Major Siegfried Westphal, who would become Chief of Staff to Field Marshal von Rundstedt in September, calculated on August 20th that even if the Americans had unlimited trucks, which they didn't, and perfect roads, which they didn't, and zero mechanical failures, which was impossible, they could sustain Patton's advance for no more than 48 additional hours. Physical laws, he reasoned, cannot be broken, not even by American industrial might. At 2 p.m. on August 25, 1944, in a requisitioned French chateau near Les, Lieutenant Colonel Lauren Ayers of the Motor Transport Service faced a room of skeptical officers. The arithmetic was stark. Patton's Third Army was consuming supplies faster than any army in history, advancing at speeds that defied all logistical planning. Traditional supply methods, rail, scheduled convoys, depot-to-front distribution had collapsed under the strain. "We're going to create a one-way highway from Cherbourg and the beaches straight to the front lines," Ayers declared. Every vehicle will operate 20 hours a day, stopping only for fuel or emergencies. We'll move at least 12,500 tons daily. The name came from railway terminology. A Red Ball freight signified a shipment that took absolute priority. The Red Ball Express would operate on the same principle. Total priority, no delays, no exceptions. The technical design challenged all German military doctrine. 2 parallel one-way highways, one for loaded trucks, the other for empties returning, would operate around the clock. Blackout discipline was abandoned. Headlights would blaze at night. Convoys would move at 5-minute intervals, maintaining an average speed of 35 mph. Mobile maintenance units were stationed every 50 miles. Military police checkpoints removed any vehicle falling below 25 Waffen. Colonel Charles O. Thrasher, commanding the advanced section of the ADCC communication zone, reviewed the numbers. We need 140 truck companies, at least 5,158 vehicles operating at 90% availability. Impossible, according to any logistics manual ever written. Yet, within 36 hours, the impossible became reality. On August 26, 1944, drivers from the 39th 16th Quartermaster Truck Company climbed into their GMC CCKW. 2 12-ton trucks, the famous Deuce and a Half, loaded with 105mm artillery shells bound for Patton's guns at Melun, 300 miles east. The demographic composition of the Red Ball Express would have confounded German racial theorists. Of the 23,000 drivers eventually serving the route, roughly 75% were African American soldiers operating within a still segregated US Army. These men, who in much of America could not eat in white-only restaurants or use white facilities, were now propelling one of the most celebrated armies in history. The drivers quickly forged their own culture on the road. They painted slogans across their trucks: Patton's Blood Bank, Hitler, Here We Come, or Detroit to Berlin Express. They invented their own traffic rules. Slower vehicles pulled aside immediately. Mechanical failures were pushed into ditches, and any truck moving below 20 mph was considered a roadblock. By August 28th, German reconnaissance units were reporting a phenomenon they had never seen before. Observers from Alfklärung 116, stationed on high ground overlooking the main Red Ball route, radioed back accounts of a continuous vehicle column. Headlights stretched for 20 kilometers. No spacing, no blackout discipline. Estimates indicated as many as 1,000 vehicles per hour. The Americans had abandoned all traditional military caution. This went against everything German doctrine taught. Headlights at night should have invited air attacks. Continuous columns offered perfect targets for artillery. A single disabled truck should have stopped an entire convoy. Yet the Americans did not seem to care. General Lieutenant Edgar Feuinger, commanding the 21st Panzer Division, personally observed the Red Ball Express on August 30th. His report to Army Group B reflected rising alarm. The enemy runs a supply system beyond our understanding. Trucks pass at 30-second intervals, day and night, without pause. They don't hide, don't scatter, don't follow any rules we recognize. This isn't military science. This is mass production applied to war. What the Germans failed to grasp was that American logistics operated under entirely different principles. Where German doctrine emphasized concealment, Americans relied on sheer volume. Where Germans tried to conserve vehicles, Americans planned for a 20% mechanical failure rate. Where Germans followed rigid procedure, Americans improvised constantly. The Red Ball Express's achievements defied German calculations of what was logistically possible. In the first week, from August 25th to 31st, 1944, it delivered 139 tons of supplies, a daily average of 12,848 tons. Trucks covered a round-trip distance of 686 miles, with 5,158 vehicles averaging 1.5 trips per day. Fuel consumed by the operation itself totaled 300,000 gallons. German logistics specialists captured these figures from American documents and dismissed them as propaganda. But the numbers were real and accelerating. By September 5th, the Red Ball Express had settled into a rhythm that seemed impossible to German officers still relying on horse-drawn transport for 80% of their needs. Convoys departed every 5 minutes from the western terminus. The average convoy carried 67 vehicles, each with a standard 5-ton load, often overloaded to 7 tons. Covering 350 miles one way took 14 hours on average, with a 2-hour turnaround at each end. At any given moment, roughly 5,000 trucks were on the move. the system innovated constantly as drivers and mechanics solved problems German military science had considered insurmountable. Daily, about 1,800 trucks broke down, yet mobile maintenance units performed roadside repairs. A triage system ensured vehicles were fixed in 15 minutes or pushed off the road. Parts were salvaged from unrepairable trucks. Engines could be swapped in 45 minutes using mobile cranes. When congestion struck on the designated Red Ball route, drivers forged alternate paths, commandeered French buses to transport personnel, borrowed German vehicles painted olive drab, and even built bypasses around destroyed bridges using rubble from bombed buildings. German observers watched in disbelief. Their doctrine emphasized careful planning, maintenance schedules, and strict procedure. The Americans broke every rule, but the system accelerated instead of collapsing. The most shocking revelation was American fuel management. The Red Ball Express consumed 300,000 gallons of gasoline daily just to run itself, more than many German armies received for all purposes. Yet fuel never ran out. Parallel pipelines under the English Channel, part of Operation Pluto, ensured a steady supply. Forward fuel dumps were established every 25 miles along the route, with tanker trucks running parallel convoys, so no vehicle waited more than 10 minutes for refueling. General Major Walter Weylemont, observing aerial reconnaissance photos, reported, "The Americans have fuel dumps larger than our entire strategic reserves. They burn more gasoline moving gasoline than we allocate to whole panzer divisions. This isn't war as we understand it, it's industrial overflow. The Red Ball Express didn't just keep Patton's divisions moving, it amplified their speed. German doctrine calculated that an armored division could advance 20 to 30 miles per day under optimal conditions. Supplied by the Red Ball Express, Patton's divisions averaged 40 to 60 miles daily for weeks. On September 1st, 1944, the 4th Armored Division moved 35 miles in the morning, halted for resupply at noon, then advanced another 32 miles in the afternoon, 67 miles in a single day, shattering German defensive planning. General Oberst Heinz Guderian, reviewing the reports in East Prussia, initially refused to believe them. No armored force could average 60 miles daily for a week. Mechanical failures alone would prevent it. This must be propaganda or misidentification. Yet intercepted American radio traffic confirmed the advance. Even more troubling, the Americans broadcast their positions openly, without code, supremely confident in their ability to move faster than the Germans could react. By September 5th, German intelligence compiled comprehensive reports on the Red Ball Express. The implications were catastrophic. Every assumption about American military capability had to be re-evaluated. Observations defied German military science. Americans abandoned damaged vehicles instead of repairing them, operated on stimulants for days, ignored camouflage, and endured mechanical failure rates of 30% daily, all while redundancy and organization kept the system moving. Fuel consumption alone would bankrupt any European army. Field Marshal Walter Model's response revealed growing desperation. If these reports are accurate, we face not a superior army, but a superior civilization. They make no effort to hide because they do not fear us. They waste resources because they have infinite resources. Military tactics alone cannot defeat this. The human cost was immense. Drivers operated for 72 straight hours, hallucinating from exhaustion and benzodrine. Accidents claimed 300 lives during the Red Ball's operational period. Trucks collided in fog, overturned on broken roads, and burned when overheated engines ignited. Yet morale remained astonishingly high. These men, mostly African American soldiers, denied equal rights at home, understood they were making history. Every mile driven, every ton delivered, disproved Hitler's racial theories. These men, who in many parts of America couldn't sit in white-only restaurants or use segregated facilities, were now keeping one of the most famous armies in history on the move. Almost immediately, the drivers built their own unique culture on the road. Trucks were covered with slogans: Patton's Blood Bank, Hitler, Here We Come, or Detroit to Berlin Express. They set their own rules for traffic. Slower vehicles pulled aside, broken down trucks were pushed into ditches, and any vehicle moving under 20 miles per hour was treated as a hazard to the convoy. By August 28th, German reconnaissance units began reporting something completely unprecedented. From high ground overlooking the Red Ball route, units from Aufklärung 116 radioed reports of a seemingly endless line of vehicles. Headlights stretched for 20 kilometers. There was no spacing, no blackout, no conventional military caution. They estimated as many as 1,000 trucks passing every hour. The Americans had abandoned every traditional precaution. This behavior defied everything German doctrine taught. Headlights at night should have invited air attacks. A continuous column of trucks should have been a perfect artillery target. A single disabled vehicle should have halted the entire line. Yet the Americans kept moving, as if unbothered. General Lieutenant Edgar Feuinger of the 21st Panzer Division observed the Red Ball Express on August 30th. His report to Army Group B reflected growing alarm. The enemy runs a supply system beyond our understanding. Trucks move in 30-second intervals day and night without stopping. They do not hide, they do not scatter, they do not follow any rules we recognize. This is not military science, it is industrial power applied to war. The Germans could not grasp that American logistics operated under completely different principles. Where German doctrine emphasized concealment, Americans relied on sheer volume. Where Germans tried to conserve vehicles, Americans planned for mechanical failures. Where Germans followed strict procedure, Americans improvised constantly. The results were staggering. From August 25th to 31st, 1944, the Red Ball Express delivered 89,939 tons of supplies, an average of 12,148 tons per day. Trucks covered a 686-mile round trip, with 5,058 vehicles averaging 1.5 trips daily. Fuel consumed by the operation alone reached 300,000 gallons. German logistics officers, still reliant on horse-drawn wagons for most transport, dismissed these figures as propaganda. But the numbers were real, and they continued to climb. By September 5th, the system had reached a rhythm the Germans could hardly comprehend. Convoys departed every 5 minutes. Each convoy averaged 67 trucks, carrying 5 tons each, sometimes overloaded to 7 tons. Covering 350 miles one way took 14 hours, with a 2-hour turnaround at each end. At any moment, roughly 5,000 trucks were on the move. Innovation happened constantly. Daily breakdowns, around 1,800 trucks, were managed by mobile maintenance units performing roadside repairs. Mechanics developed a triage system: fix it in 15 minutes or push it off the road. Parts were salvaged from irreparable vehicles. Engines could be swapped in just 45 minutes with mobile cranes. When congestion built up, drivers carved out alternate routes, commandeered French buses to move personnel, borrowed and repainted German vehicles, and even built bypasses around destroyed bridges using rubble from bombed buildings. The Germans watched in disbelief. Their doctrine demanded careful planning, scheduled maintenance, and strict procedures. The Americans ignored all of it, but their system moved faster and stronger than ever. Fuel management was equally astonishing. The Red Ball Express used 300,000 gallons of gasoline daily just to keep moving, more than some German armies received in total. Yet fuel shortages never occurred. Parallel pipelines under the English Channel, part of Operation Pluto, supplied a continuous flow. Forward fuel dumps every 25 miles ensured trucks never waited more than 10 minutes to refuel. General Major Walter Willemont noted from aerial photographs, "The Americans have fuel dumps larger than our entire strategic reserves. They use more gasoline moving gasoline than we allocate to entire panzer divisions. This isn't war as we know it, it's industrial power unleashed." The Red Ball Express didn't just supply the front, it accelerated the advance. German doctrine calculated that an armored division could move 20-30 miles per day at best. Patton's divisions, supplied by the Red Ball Express, averaged 40-60 miles daily for weeks. On September 1st, 1944, the 4th Armored Division advanced 35 miles in the morning, paused for resupply at noon, then pushed another 32 miles in the afternoon, 67 miles in a single day, completely shattering German defensive planning. General Oberst Heinz Guderian, reviewing reports from East Prussia, initially refused to believe it. No armored force could maintain 60 miles per day for a week. Mechanical failures alone should have made it impossible. He assumed it was propaganda or misidentification, but intercepted American radio traffic confirmed it. Even more alarming, Americans broadcasted their positions openly, confident they could outpace German response. By September 5th, German intelligence had compiled extensive reports. The implications were catastrophic. Every assumption about American military capability had to be re-evaluated. Observers noted Americans abandoned damaged vehicles, ran on stimulants for days, ignored camouflage, and endured daily mechanical failures of 30%, yet the system continued. Fuel consumption alone would have bankrupted any European army. Field Marshal Walter Mottle's reaction reflected desperation. If these reports are true, we face not just a superior army, but a superior civilization. They make no effort to hide because they do not fear us. They waste resources because they have endless resources. We cannot defeat this with tactics alone. The human toll was severe. Drivers worked 72 straight hours, hallucinating from exhaustion and benzedrine. Accidents claimed 300 lives during the Red Ball Express's operational period. Trucks collided in fog, overturned on damaged roads, and ignited from overheated engines. Yet morale remained remarkably high. These men, mostly African American, denied equal rights at home, knew they were making history. Every mile driven, every ton delivered, disproved Hitler's racial theories. At every stop along the route, children would gather, and the drivers handed out chocolate, cigarettes, and soap. The contrast with the German occupation was striking. Where the Germans rationed everything tightly, Americans gave freely and casually. German intelligence noted the propaganda effect. French civilians now regarded American victory as inevitable, citing the truck convoys as proof. Resistance activity along the Red Ball routes increased by 400%. Populations that had once accepted German rule now openly opposed it. By early September 1944, the Red Ball Express faced its toughest challenge. Patton's Third Army had pushed so far forward that even this legendary supply line struggled to keep up. Round trips now exceeded 700 miles. Drivers were collapsing, vehicles breaking down, and German observers detected the strain. On September 8th, General de Panzer Trooper Hasse von Manteuffel reported American supply lines show signs of collapse. Convoy intervals have stretched from 5 to 15 minutes. Vehicle speeds are slowing. This is our opportunity. Yet, once again, American adaptability stunned the Germans. Within 72 hours, the Red Ball Express reorganized. Intermediate transfer points were created, reducing individual runs to 350 miles. Driver rotation systems were implemented. Forward maintenance bases were established. The number of vehicles was doubled. By September 12th, deliveries had actually increased. The crisis that should have halted the operation had instead strengthened it. Supplementing the Red Ball Express, Americans launched another logistics innovation German officers had deemed impossible: large-scale aerial resupply. C-47 transport planes began carrying critical supplies directly to forward units, each delivering 3 tons. On September 16, 1944, German observers counted 900 transport flights in a single day, 2,700 tons delivered by air. At Stalingrad, the Luftwaffe had struggled to move 300 tons daily, considered maximum effort. The Americans, however, treated transport aircraft like trucks: no fighter escorts, no fuel limitations, assuming losses and overwhelming them with numbers. German commanders could not match this industrial arithmetic. The Red Ball Express also operated under command principles that shattered German expectations. Junior officers made decisions that would have required generals in the Wehrmacht. Sergeants oversaw operations larger than anything a German colonel managed. This decentralization bewildered observers. American logistics seemed to function without central control. Every lieutenant acted like a general, every sergeant like a colonel. Chaos should have reigned, yet efficiency prevailed. German rigid hierarchy could not compete. By October 1944, advancing railheads gradually reduced Red Ball Express requirements. What was planned as a 10-day operation had lasted 82, delivering 412,000 tons of supplies over 122 million ton miles. German commanders, now defending their own borders, reflected on what they had witnessed. Field Marshal Model wrote in his final report, "We were not defeated primarily by American tanks or aircraft. We were defeated by American trucks. The Red Ball Express proved that in modern warfare, logistics is strategy. Even the transition to rail transport was a marvel." American engineers reconstructed 1,000 miles of destroyed French railway while the Red Ball continued running, often using captured German equipment. The final statistics were staggering. Over 82 days, the Red Ball Express delivered 412,193 tons of supplies, covered 222 million ton miles, operated with 5,158 trucks on average, peaking at 7,000, employed 23,000 drivers, consumed 700,000 gallons of fuel daily, delivered 40,000 tons of ammunition to Patton alone, transported 15 million rations, and moved 135,000 tons of medical supplies. German officers, reviewing these figures in captivity, admitted they had estimated American logistics based on European precedent. They had multiplied their own best performance by 3 and assumed that was America's limit. They were off by a factor of 10. Beyond tonnage and distance, the Red Ball Express shattered German belief in their own superiority. Officers who had dismissed Americans as soft and mechanically dependent watched those same Americans perform logistics miracles through determination, ingenuity, and industrial might. German POWs would stand silently at camp fences, counting passing Red Ball trucks. Some wept. They realized the truth. Americans could not only supply their armies, they could waste more than Germans could produce. Their worldview collapsed, one truck at a time. The operation also forced an unexpected racial reckoning within the US military. Its success relied overwhelmingly on African American soldiers, still segregated, denied equal treatment, and barred from combat roles. In September 1944, General Eisenhower visited Red Ball operations and witnessed this contradiction firsthand. His aide, Captain Harry Butcher, recorded, "The general stood watching colored drivers who had been operating for 20 hours straight. He said, 'These men are winning the war as surely as any infantry. We need to reconsider many things.'" The operation created pressure toward integration that would contribute to military desegregation. 3 years later, African American soldiers had proven in France what they had always known. Given the tools and opportunity, they could match any soldier. The Red Ball was their battlefield, and they triumphed decisively. German racial theorists struggled to reconcile the facts. SS publications simply stopped mentioning American logistics. The evidence was too overwhelming to deny. Post-war, German engineers studied the Red Ball Express intensively. Its lessons revolutionized logistics worldwide. Volume overcomes inefficiency. Mechanical redundancy eliminates vulnerability. Decentralized execution enables speed. Standardization multiplies capability. And human endurance exceeds prior assumptions. Among the 23,000 Red Ball drivers, countless individual acts of heroism amazed German observers. Verified records tell stories like Corporal John L. Houston, who drove continuously for 48 hours to deliver ammunition to the 2nd Armored Division at Cambrai, falling asleep at the wheel 3 times, yet continuing after being revived by fellow drivers. Private Booker T. Washington's truck caught fire while carrying medical supplies. Instead of abandoning it, he drove 2 miles to a field hospital before escaping the cab, saving wounded soldiers from both sides. These stories, multiplied thousands of times, revealed American military culture, initiative, calculated risk-taking, and mission accomplishment over strict adherence to procedure. Desperately, the Germans tried to replicate the Red Ball Express. In late 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, Operation Greif included plans to use captured American trucks to create supply lines, but nothing matched the scale, efficiency, or ingenuity of the original. The German effort to replicate the Red Ball Express failed immediately. Their drivers couldn't match American speeds. Their mechanics couldn't repair captured trucks fast enough. Fuel supplies were insufficient, and most importantly, they couldn't mimic the American mindset of seemingly unlimited resources. The officer in charge of the operation reported, "We captured 50 American trucks. Within a week, 30 were out of commission. Americans would have replaced them immediately. We tried to repair them. That difference explains our defeat." The winter of 1944-45 provided the ultimate test. Freezing rain, ice, and snow should have stopped all-wheeled transport. German doctrine declared wheeled logistics impossible below -10 degrees Celsius. Yet the Red Ball Express continued. Drivers chained tires, poured alcohol into radiators, and kept rolling. Speeds dropped from 35 to 15 miles per hour, but delivery tonnage never stopped. German observers reported ice-covered convoys moving through blizzards that had paralyzed panzer divisions. The Americans had created a logistics system that functioned regardless of weather, terrain, or enemy action. It wasn't elegant by German standards, but it was unstoppable. In May 1945, captured German logistics officers were tasked with studying Red Ball operations for historical records. Their conclusions were unanimous and devastating to German pride. General Infantry Friedrich Schultz wrote, "The Red Ball Express represents a type of warfare we never imagined. Americans built a temporary civilization, thousands of men, thousands of vehicles, millions of tons of supplies, all existing solely to feed armies, then dissolved when no longer needed. We built permanent infrastructure over years. They created superior temporary systems in days." The most insightful analysis came from General Hegderian, father of German armored warfare. "We invented blitzkrieg, but never solved its fundamental limitation, logistics. Americans solved it through industrial excess we deemed impossible. The Red Ball Express was not a supply line. It was a flowing river of material that drowned our forces." The Red Ball Express cost the United States roughly $100 million in 1944, vehicles destroyed, fuel consumed, roads damaged, French claims settled. German officers, accustomed to scarcity, could not fathom the figure, yet the Americans considered it a bargain. The operation enabled the capture of 400,000 German soldiers, the liberation of France, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and shortened the war by an estimated 6 months. Each day of war cost America $250 million. In effect, the Red Ball Express paid for itself in a single day of shortened conflict. Lieutenant General John C.H. Lee, overseeing logistics for the European theater, explained, "We wore out 5,000 trucks and 23,000 men to destroy the German army in France. In any previous war, that would have been catastrophic losses. In American industrial war, it is acceptable overhead. An unexpected legacy of the Red Ball Express was its post-war impact on civilian logistics. Thousands of returning drivers, experienced in running the world's largest transport network, went on to found trucking companies, design interstate highways, and build modern American logistics industries. Companies such as Yellow Freight, Roadway, and Consolidated Freightways were founded by veterans who applied lessons from the Red Ball. Volume beats efficiency, speed beats perfection, and keeping trucks rolling 24 hours a day can move the world." Historians agree the Red Ball Express was the decisive logistics operation of the European theater. Without it, Patton's advance would have stalled, Paris would have fallen weeks later, and German forces might have established winter defensive lines. The operation validated American military doctrine, which prioritized logistics over battlefield maneuvers. Where German officers studied Clausewitz and tactical maneuvers, Americans studied Detroit assembly lines and railway timetables. The Red Ball Express proved that in modern warfare, the ability to supply forces determines victory more than battlefield brilliance. On September 15, 1944, Field Marshal Georg von Rundert, Supreme German Commander in the West, received detailed intelligence on the Red Ball Express. After hours of study, he called his staff together. "Gentlemen," he said, "we face something beyond a military solution. The Americans have created a supply system that makes distance irrelevant. Our strategy assumed they would reach a point where their advancing forces outrun supplies. That point does not exist. They have revolutionized warfare, and we are fighting the last war." His operations officer, Oberst Hans Spiedel, suggested using the Luftwaffe to interdict the Red Ball routes. Von Rundert's response reflected total understanding. "With what shall we interdict? They have 6,000 trucks. Destroy 1,000? They will replace them in a week. We would need to destroy 200 trucks daily to match their production. We don't have 200 aircraft total." Behind these numbers were stories of human endurance that amazed German observers. Drivers who hadn't slept for 3 days, refusing relief for fear their trucks wouldn't make it. Mechanics working in freezing rain to keep convoys moving. Teenagers lying about their age to drive. These stories spread and created a mythology that demoralized German forces. The Americans were not soft, as propaganda suggested. They drove harder than Germans drove horses, but voluntarily. This made them far more dangerous than German doctrine had anticipated. The Red Ball Express became an unintentional psychological weapon. German soldiers could hear the convoys at night, endless engines that never stopped. The sound alone acted as warfare. Some German units reported phantom convoys, with the Americans broadcasting truck engine sounds even when convoys weren't present. German soldiers believed them real, demonstrating the psychological toll the Red Ball Express inflicted. In November 1944, with rail lines partially restored, the Red Ball Express was officially discontinued. Its methods, however, had permanently transformed military logistics. The principle of continuous high-volume, wasteful but effective supply became American doctrine. The final innovation was how quickly it dissolved. 23,000 men, 6,000 vehicles, hundreds of installations gone in 72 hours. Troops were reassigned, vehicles redistributed, routes returned to civilian use. Germans took months to build smaller operations and years to dismantle them. Americans created what they needed, used it, discarded it, and built something better. When German generals surrendered in May 1945, many specifically cited the Red Ball Express as proof that continued resistance was hopeless. General der Panzertrooper Hasse von Mantoyel stated, "When we understood your logistics capacity, we knew the war was lost. You could supply armies faster than we could destroy them. The Red Ball Express was a weapon against which we had no defense." Field Marshal Albert Kessler, one of Germany's most competent commanders, was asked what surprised him most about American forces. His answer: "Not your tanks, not your planes, but your trucks. The Red Ball Express showed us that you had militarized your society's entire production capacity. We were fighting your factories, not just your soldiers." The final statistics tell the story. 412,993 tons delivered, 122 million ton-miles covered, 5,158 trucks daily, 7,000 peak, 23,000 drivers involved, 82 days of operation, 57 million gallons of fuel consumed, 180,000 tires worn out, over 5,000 vehicles destroyed, costing $100 million, defeating 47 German divisions, and shortening the war by 180 days. These numbers represent more than logistics. They mark the moment when warfare itself changed, proving that industrial capacity and supply, not just tactical brilliance, determine victory. In 1994, on the 50th anniversary of D-Day, the United States Postal Service unveiled a commemorative stamp honoring the Red Ball Express at the National Postal Museum in Washington, D.C. The ceremony celebrated an operation often overshadowed by combat, yet one that proved decisive in the Allied victory. Veterans attending spoke with pride about the mission that showed American industrial power and sheer determination could overcome any obstacle. These men had driven through exhaustion, through mechanical failures, through weather that would have stopped tanks. Most were black soldiers serving in a segregated army, denied recognition at the time, yet they delivered victory at 35 miles per hour. The Red Ball Express demonstrated a critical truth about modern warfare. Logistics isn't just support, it is the main effort. The operation showed that an industrial democracy could mobilize resources on a scale that even totalitarian efficiency could not match. German generals who had once scoffed at American supply efforts were silenced as 6,000 trucks delivered, 12,400 tons of supplies, daily across 700 miles of liberated France. The Germans had assumed that Americans would follow European precedents, conserve resources, advance cautiously. Instead, Americans unleashed a logistical tsunami that overwhelmed German forces with sheer abundance. The success of the Red Ball Express did not rest on military genius alone. It came from uniquely American traits Germans could never comprehend: industrial excess, mechanical skill, improvisational ingenuity, and most importantly, the initiative of individual soldiers making decisions that, in the Wehrmacht, would have required Field Marshal approval. General George S. Patton, whose Third Army benefited most from the Red Ball Express, captured the ultimate tribute in his memoirs. The truck drivers of the Red Ball Express deserve as much credit for Germany's defeat as any combat unit. They drove through exhaustion, through mechanical failure, through weather that stopped armor. Without them, the Third Army doesn't move. Without movement, we don't win. They were black soldiers mostly, segregated, discriminated against, denied recognition. But they won the war as surely as any rifleman. History must record this truth. That truth stands as the enduring testament to the Red Ball Express. 23,000 drivers, mostly African American, manned 6,000 trucks along a one-way highway to victory. They achieved feats German military science had declared impossible, supplying advancing armies faster than physics should allow, maintaining operational tempo beyond human endurance, and proving that in modern warfare, the side with the most trucks often outperforms the side with the best tactics. German generals, who had laughed at American logistics in August 1944, surrendered 82 days later to armies fueled and supplied by the Red Ball Express. They finally realized that American trucks had outpaced German tanks, that industrial abundance could overwhelm military excellence, and that logistics had become strategy. The Red Ball Express officially ended on November 16, 1944, yet its legacy resonates through military history. It proved that in the industrial era, victory belongs not to the bravest soldiers or the most brilliant generals, but to the nation that can deliver the most supplies, the fastest and the farthest. The highways of France still bear the scars of the Red Ball Express. Ruts carved by overloaded trucks, bridges hastily repaired, roadsides littered with abandoned vehicles. But the greatest monument to the operation is the speed of Allied victory. Every day saved countless lives. The Red Ball Express shortened the war by months. German generals who once mocked American logistics learned the hardest lesson of modern warfare. Amateurs talk tactics. Professionals talk logistics, and Americans talk trucks. And the Red Ball Express spoke loudly indeed through the roar of 6,000 engines running without pause, carrying democracy and destruction down a one-way road to victory. The final word comes from a German officer, his name lost to history, quoted by a Red Bull driver at the 1994 commemoration. Standing along a road in Belgium, watching the endless convoy, he said in accented English to his captives, "We prepared for everything. Your tanks, your planes, your ships. But we never prepared for your trucks. How do you defeat an enemy who has more trucks than you have soldiers?" The answer passed before him every 5 minutes, driven by exhausted Americans who were rewriting the rules of warfare, one delivery at a time. The Red Ball Express had transformed logistics into strategy, supply into victory, and trucks into the most decisive weapon of the European war. German generals stopped laughing when they understood the truth. But by then, Patton was already at their gates, supplied by the greatest logistics operation in military history.